when you have thick obligation, strong sense of obligation, and when there are strong family ties as a result, and you feel a duty to your family and other family members and to your community and to your country and those kind of things, that is the context in which we flourish. That's where you will find, when there are stronger obligations to another human being, you will find a stronger relationship there. Welcome to the Maven Parent Podcast, and I just want to let our listeners know at this very moment, while we are recording, it is a perfect Southern California day. And so you may be listening to this in the frozen tundra of like Minnesota or the overly humid South. And I want you to know we are recording in perfect weather. It's like 76 degrees and sunny. In fact, I went surfing this morning, went to the beach. Yeah. I'm actually recording this podcast in my board shorts.
That's actually true.
Should I show our YouTube
You sound
audience? Like
such a bragger.
I am.
This is how Californians get a bad reputation. Because we're cocky.
No. I want to give all those people out there, when we travel and we speak, I get so much crap for being from California now. I mean, people look at me like, how can you live there? And it's, because there certainly some of the politics, almost all of the politics out here can be crazy. Although we're in a more moderate area. But anyway, this is why I live here. This is why that's one reason. I also like to be in the middle of the fight. So, so anyway, wherever you're at and listening to this, I just know that your weather and your circumstances are just not as good as ours right now. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, if you know anything about us in this podcast, sarcasm is our love language, and this is just the way I love my audience. So I love you, audience.
You do. You're loving them really well right now.
Also, Erin, you're supposed to point out the hat that I'm wearing today.
Oh, was I?
Yeah, you're supposed to. That was scripted. We scripted this.
You forgot to tell me.
What does the
Brett,
hat say?
What's the hat you're wearing today?
Erin, I'm glad.
Steel City?
I'm really glad you asked. Steel City. Just in honor of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the NFL season starting, and us rooting for our Steelers. And there's a Monday night game on tonight.
Now, people are wondering, why on earth, are you bringing this up? But second, why would a Californian be a Steeler fan? That's way over on the other side of the country.
Yeah, that's because my dad, my family on my dad's side were all raised in the Steel City in Pittsburgh, and my dad raised me right. And so, and if you are not if you're a Steeler hater out there, I'm going to ask that you please stop listening to the podcast. Okay. No, actually, I'd love to debate you on that and show you why you're wrong. So, today's podcast, we're gonna engage with a YouTube comment, which is dangerous territory. We don't always engage with those comments. We got our interview with Eric Hernandez last week. We got a lot of atheists engaging with that.
Some people.
Kind of stirred up the hornets, the atheist hornet's nest. And not all, and frankly, a lot of times on social media, the comments they're not worthy of being interacted with, because sometimes the thinking is so bad, and there's a lot of mockery. But this is a comment where I think there may be a little bit of, let me read it to you. Okay, so this was in response to our recent replay of our podcast entitled 4 Ways to Get Your Kids to Do Chores, right? And we talked about how can we get our kids to develop a work ethic and practical ways we can get them to do their chores. So here is the response.
We made an argument for having them do chores. We had to start there first, and then how to get them to do it.
In this day and age, that is revolutionary.
And the comment reflects that. Like, we made an argument for why kids should have chores in their home, and we started there for this reason, because what comment you're going to read is an idea that is rampant in the world of parenting right now.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, if I were to guess, it maybe is a comment from, someone who has a secular worldview or who's not a believer. So in that podcast, we make a biblical argument. We could make a common sense argument as well. But nonetheless, no matter what worldview you're coming from, I think we as parents need to be aware of this kind of thinking so that we don't absorb it. Mm-hmm. And we'll read the comment and then we'll kind of dissect it a little bit. But here's the comment. Yes, you do things every day that you would rather not do, but you obligated yourselves. Your kids did not obligate themselves to your work. No, they should not be doing your work just because they are as tall as you. Except for cleaning up after themselves, they should not have to do any chores without pay. Okay, you say they don't begrudge it. If they want to do it, okay. But if you are in any way threatening them with punishment, that is abuse. You are not entitled to slaves. Okay, let me make just a reflection here, because I want to just narrate for those of you who are listening. I want you to see how sometimes I think social media can condition us in unhealthy ways. Like, my question would be, if this person was sitting here next to us or talking to us face to face, would they make these kind of claims? Would they look me in the eye and say, you are not entitled to slaves? Now, maybe they would, but I think a lot of times, and this is mild in one sense, because a lot of times what you see in terms of the comments on YouTube are very aggressive or rude, or they're mocking. But this is a little more subtle. But I again, if I was engaging with someone face to face, would I say these kind of things? Oh, well, you're abusing your child. Oh, you're not entitled to slaves. If I was talking about my kids doing chores. Mm-hmm. But this is how social media can condition us it's the whole kind of outrage machine type mm-hmm. thing, where you react, outrage, you make your kids do work, outrage, they're slaves, kind of thing. And it really mitigates against rational discussion, mm-hmm. these kind of statements. And we're going to go through and pick this apart a little bit here, but I want people to sit back and notice that. Mm-hmm. Be careful how you interact online and in social media. Mm-hmm. And we have to do this too. We've made mistakes. We've deleted comments because they were they weren't Christ honoring. They were maybe immature, or they were snarky, or whatever. Now, sometimes, as the Proverbs say, there's a time to answer a fool with his folly, and sometimes there's not a time. Or you hold back from answering a fool with his folly. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out first. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's think through this whole idea. Yes, you do things every day you would rather not do, right? We're adults, so there's things that we do that we would rather not do. And maybe, I'm guessing they're saying, you do that, you obligated yourselves, so those are the choices we made. Mm-hmm. But our kids did not. So they haven't put themselves in a situation where they are obligated, because I think the assumption here is that they didn't choose. They didn't get a chance to make a choice whether or not they wanted to be our kids, whether they wanted to be born, mm-hmm. Whether they wanted us to take care of them. And so it's our work, right? That's what this person indicates. No, they should not be doing your work just because they are as tall as you. Well,
that just because they are as tall as you is a comment to what I said, because I was giving the example that oftentimes we will baby our children when they will be as tall and as big as us, and we still don't put expectations on them that they are very capable to do as much work as we are. Mm-hmm. Not that kids do as much work as mom and dad, but if you have able-bodied children like that are as tall as you might need to look at them and realize, wow, they're able-bodied and can do a lot more. So that was a little comment about what I had said about them being as tall as you. But of course, no, they should not be doing your work.
Yeah, that's, one of the first things to highlight and take exception with. Mm-hmm. What do you mean our work? So is doing the dishes, is doing laundry, is vacuuming, is sweeping up around the house. This is just our work. This is just the parents' work. And see, this is the thing. How would you go about determining what is our work as parents and what is the kids' work? Now, just from this comment, and of course we'd want to engage more with this person, but we can only engage with the comment. They're saying, except for cleaning up after themselves. So it almost sounds like, except for directly cleaning up after themselves, there's no other work that's theirs. It's all ours. It's all the parents.
And so think about that. So, okay, so let's follow, we're following their ideas to their conclusion, right? So let's think about this idea of only cleaning up after themselves. So in a house with 3 kids, say, so everyone sits and eats dinner. So then does every person then go and wash their plate, their fork, their spoon, and their cup, and then that's all, they just are responsible for that? But then the meal was cooked, and so everyone used that pot. So shoot, now who has to do that one? Because everyone pulled out of that. And then there's serving spoons, everyone touched those. So then, now this is getting complicated.
Yeah.
And then, so they use the bathroom. How is that going to work? So everyone in a family uses the bathroom. So every time we use the bathroom, we have to clean it right after ourselves? Or when does, and then I would ask too, now when does that kick in? When does they have to clean up after themselves kick in?
Yeah, and
is that at 15 or 10 or what?
Everyone walks into the house with dirty shoes and tracks dirt around the house. I mean, I think what you're doing, Erin, is really good. You're laying out, let's take the ideas to their logical end, their logical conclusion. Yeah, how are you going to work all this out to figure out whose work is what? And even as you're saying that, it just occurred to me, gosh, what a way to foster selfishness in your kids.
Yeah.
To say, I'm only cleaning up this.
My stuff.
I'm only cleaning up my stuff. I didn't do that. I didn't do this. It just struck me. Wow, the selfishness that you would breed, because you're now not teaching your kids to do anything besides their work. So then you lose an incredible opportunity to help teach them about the virtue of selflessness and giving and doing things, sacrificing for others, which are those things. Oftentimes we talk about those things as maybe being hard. In one sense, there's another side to that coin, and it reminds me of what Jesus says when he talks about how his burden is light, his yoke is easy, because that's how you flourish. That's how you. When you are a selfless person, and we don't mean letting people trample all over you. We're not saying being a doormat. We're saying being a selfless person. When you look to the needs of others, and you do things for others that you maybe don't have an obligation to do. When you learn to clean up after others in a home, when there's selflessness and not a bunch of selfish people living, that home is much more harmonious. You flourish, you experience a sense of joy and contentment. There's harmony in the home. So again, this is the context of the larger Christian worldview isn't, hey, make those kids do work and make them do the work for you. It's no, have them develop a work ethic that's going to serve them well in life so they flourish.
Right. And we talked about how work is dignifying for human beings. So it's the opposite of what they're suggesting, that it's slavery, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But work is dignifying. From the Christian worldview, we know that not only does God declare work dignifying, but then we also know from experience and from reality that when you work and you see what you're capable of, that dignifies you as a human being. And also, it's what you're talking about. It's the Philippians 2, think of others more highly than yourself. So this flies in the face of that. This is not the Christian worldview of how we are to view interactions with our family and others. Think of others more highly than ourselves. And so you think of that picture I described where every person in the family, say there's 5 family members, 4 or 10, however big the family is, everyone washes their own plate, their own fork, and then you're going to have to fight out who washes the pots and pans. I don't know how you're going to resolve that. Think about that compared to our normal, the Kunkel family, how we've had to figure out, through the years. Of course, when the kids were little, it looked different. And we talked about that on the work podcast, just how you can start the little ones pitching in. But to now where our kids are big, and so dinner is cooked and we all sit down and then cleanup happens. And so 1 or 2 kids are on the dishes. Another kid is on wiping down the table, vacuuming the floor. Another kid's on taking out all the trash. Another kid's on putting the leftovers away in the Tupperware. And we break up all the work. And
everyone pitches in. There's a sense of obligation, especially if mom or dad or older sister, whoever, put a lot of hard work into preparing that meal that everyone is benefiting from.
Yeah.
Right. Then the obligation that we feel to that person is a good thing. And when you feel that strong obligation, and then it results in, okay, hey, you cooked, Mom. Sit there, relax, enjoy your glass of wine. We're all going to clean up because you just served us. Now it motivates us to want to serve you.
Well, yeah, that's it. It builds this camaraderie of we're all in this together. And so mom or dad or mom and one of the siblings or dad and one of the siblings did all the work to prepare. So like you said, in our family, if you cooked it, then for most times, there are exceptions, you won't have to clean. And then everyone else picks that up because that's you thought of me, now I think of you. And we're not constantly, is this fair? Is that fair? Is this fair? And
is that my work? Is this your work? Kind of thing. And I think, you, as you were kind of giving those examples, or kind of taking this idea to its logical conclusion and giving the examples, it also struck me that it's just completely impractical to try and outline whose work is what, in addition to being a way to breed selfishness.
Yeah, because there's just too many community spaces in a home. There's just too many things that all of us use. The living room, the kitchen table, the bathrooms, the walkways, all of that. And so do you teach your kids only do for yourself and don't think about anyone else but yourself? Or do you teach kids, hey, we all use this space, so let's all take care of it? And which one, even just without going to the scriptures, which one makes sense of reality and whether you want to admit it or not, brings about a harmony in living together? If 3 men are sharing a house, like you shared a house with some guys in college. And so if everyone there lived in, just whatever I touch, whatever I do, is the house going to be harmonious if everyone does things and pitches in, or just that everyone just looks after their own thing? We all know which house will have peace and harmony, even if it takes some work to figure out how are we going to break up this work, or who's going to do what. It takes work, but it's worthy work because it brings about in harmony, because we know this from scripture, but I think also we know it from reality too. We are not made to just think about ourselves. When we do that, we are miserable. We are miserable people when we are the center of the universe. And so we don't want it to raise children that think they are the center of the universe. It will lead to disaster.
And, there is, in the modern mind, there is a pushback against this idea of obligation.
Yeah.
Right? And this is really important for us as parents and adults to think about as we talk with our kids. And there was some data that came out back in 2005. Christian Smith, who's a sociologist, did a big study on the religious and spiritual lives of American teenagers, released a book called Soul Searching. They've done some follow-up books. And I remember that book really gave us a good sense of where American kids are at. And not just American kids, American adults as well. But one of the things they found in that study was that the whole language of obligation, accountability, responsibility, duty, all of that is just almost completely dropped out of the language of our kids. Mm-hmm. These are concepts, they're not thick concepts, so to speak. They're very thin concepts in the modern world, meaning there's not a whole lot of stock that's put in these things. We don't even talk this way anymore because in a relativistic culture that has undermined truth, there aren't these, objective moral values. And therefore, if there aren't these objective moral values and objective moral commands, then there's no real obligations. The only obligation you have in today's culture is to be true to yourself, right? To be authentic. You do you, I do me. Live your truth. All the cultural mantras out there are relativistic. And what they do is they undermine the whole idea of obligation, that there's some obligation outside of me that I have a relationship to that has some kind of bearing on me, that kind of presses in on me. Like that's what an obligation does. There's this oughtness that I feel, right? I ought to do this or I ought to do that. In today's culture, there are no oughts. The only ought is be true to yourself. And I want you to see that this is poisonous to our kids. We have got to battle these kind of ideas. It's poisonous to our kids. It's poisonous to their flourishing. It's poisonous to our families and poisonous to the flourishing of our families. What you discover about reality is that actually when you have thick obligation, strong sense of obligation, and when there are strong family ties as a result, and you feel a duty to your family and other family members and to your community and to your country and those kind of things, that is the context in which we flourish. That's where you will find when there are stronger obligations to another human being, you will find a stronger relationship there. I think about the husband and wife relationship. There are really strong obligations that we have towards one another. If we don't live according to those obligations, we will ruin the relationship. But when we live according to those obligations, it causes us to flourish. We do better. We do well. There's contentment and joy and happiness. And I think we just need to connect those ideas for our kids. Yeah. So let me just kind of summarize what I just said there. Relativism, the view that there is no truth, is I think one of the streams of influence that's pouring in here. And even if it's not in this comment, it's certainly in the cultural waters that we live in. This idea that there is no objective truth, or you've got your own truth and you live your own truth, will undermine the idea that there are these objective obligations that we have. And now in the Christian worldview, these make sense. Our obligations are the result of God's commands. If the God of the universe, our creator, has made us and then given us commands to live by, then we have corresponding obligations. And those commands relate to our relationships with one another. And so we want to articulate these things for our kids. So that's a very, I think, practical step, is that, here's how I would put this practical step. Watch your language. Watch the language that you use. And if you are not talking about duty and responsibilities and obligations, start weaving that into your conversations with your kids. And and I don't just mean, hey, kid, you have a duty to your family. No, not only do you have duties and responsibilities and obligations to your family, guess what? Your family has obligations to you. And when you are in dire circumstances, when you are struggling, when you need help, you know who's going to be there for you? Your family. Your family, because we have obligations to help you and take care of you.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how the relativism does just seep into the way we think about things. And so even this comment, like I'm thinking about a parent who is saying, think of a young parent who's trying to implement chores. And I think we mentioned in the chore podcast how when our oldest daughter was in school at late elementary, junior high, and we were upping her chores. And there were several times she said to us, why do I have all these chores? None of my friends have chores. And that was true. But we knew the chores were good for her. Anyway, when this comment of, hey, you shouldn't force your kids to do something. They didn't ask to be brought in the world. You brought them into the world. And we can hear a comment like that and not be sure how to think through it, which is why we're doing this podcast. But you think about the difference of that kind of attitude of a child thinking, I didn't ask to be brought into this world. My parents did it, so they owe me. And the attitude of, shouldn't we be grateful that our parents brought us into this world? The posture of gratefulness to parents who sacrificed so much to have us and raise us and take care of us until we were ready to do it on our own. And how you think about the world completely different. I think this comment underneath it is a worldview of that you aren't grateful for the things that people do for you. And about your point too of how God specifically commands us on how to treat other people. And so we do these things because we're teaching our children God's commands. And I was thinking about the 10 commandments in the book of Exodus. And the first few commandments, of course, are about our relationship to God. And then the commandments turn to our relationship with others. And the first one is about our relationship with our parents.
Honor your father and mother.
Honor your father and mother is opposite of what this comment is suggesting. And I would say is opposite of so much parenting advice that is coming at parents today that is completely child-centered, meaning everything is about them and what makes them happy in the moment, and we're not to inconvenience them or in any way make them unhappy or in any way make them think about us as human beings.
Yeah.
It's just the child is elevated, and it is our goal to have peace at any expense.
Yeah, parents, let me just pause here. If you are getting a lot of advice from child psychologists on Instagram and TikTok, it might not be a good place for you to get advice. There's a lot of unwise advice that we're hearing from people with professional degrees who we're supposed to look to as the experts. And what you end up hearing, and if you can see it and you can spot it, you'll see a secular worldview that takes the child as an individual, kind of autonomous individual, and you talked about this child-centric approach, and that kind of language, I think, betrays this view that we are these autonomous individuals and it's all about me and my life and my happiness, and that there is no greater obligations and responsibilities to anyone else outside of me. And it really is the result of a secular worldview, that there is not a God who I am ultimately responsible to and obligated to. In fact, this is why teaching a strong sense of duty and obligation in our families it helps our kids ultimately to relate to God well. To not, so if you resent the obligations you feel like your parents put on you.
Yeah, wait till you hear about God.
Exactly.
I mean, really. Yeah, like if you have this attitude like mom and dad brought me into this world, well, wait till you're old enough to realize actually mom and dad played a role in that, obviously, but God is the creator.
The sovereign God of the universe.
And God doesn't say you do you.
Yeah.
Jesus actually says, die to yourself. Jesus says, die to yourself, take up your cross and follow me. Jesus does not say you do you. So you think about a child who's nurtured to think the whole world revolves around them. Mom and dad owe me because I didn't ask for this. And now you have to face God.
Yeah. So this is where in our parenting, it's always in this larger context, of the Christian worldview, a theistic worldview, where I'm not just getting my kids to do chores so they do my work. I'm not just getting my kids to do chores just so they develop a healthy work ethic. This is all related to their relationship with God, because everything is related to their relationship with God. We don't do this sacred secular split, this dichotomy where, oh yeah, you got your spiritual life over here and then you got all the other areas of life over here. No, those need to be brought back together and integrate. Integrate is not even the right word. They need to be tied into one another so deeply that we see that what we're doing with our kids as we help them to develop a work ethic and get them to do chores and contribute around the family and develop these strong sense of obligations, it's all playing back into their relationship with God. Because ultimately, we are to submit our lives to our Creator. In fact, that's the problem with humanity, right? Our rebellion against our Creator, unwillingness to submit to Him. And so doing all these things helps to shape the soul of our kid and conditions their soul, or maybe the better word is cultivates the conditions of their soul, or cultivates their character in such a way that they're going to be more open to the Lord. And it also helps them to get along with reality, because guess what? Everybody has to learn how to submit to someone or something.
Yeah.
A boss, a lawmaker, government, local government, all kinds of things. And that's just life. That's the nature of reality.
Well, that's why I say if you resent your parents, wait till you meet God kind of thing, because God does ask a lot of us. God does ask for things from us. But what we find out is that the things God asks us to do, the way God lays out the 10 Commandments, for example, it turns out if you live that way, you'll flourish. And so it turns out the things that God lays out for us comes out of His goodness and His love for us, because He made us and He knows that that's good, which reminds me of Jesus's words in Matthew and Mark when He talks about when you lay down your life, you'll find it. And that's what Jesus means.
Yeah. And I think we've read Psalm 1 on this podcast as well. Psalm 1, blessed is the man who does not walk in the way of sinners or sit in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And on His law, he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree that is planted by streams of water. And you get this picture of flourishing. So this is why we talk about these things for the good of our kids. And because of the nature of reality, because you go ahead and live your life, try to live your life as if you have no obligations to others, and you will be a miserable person. You will discover a lot of unhappiness. You will become a selfish person that a lot of people don't want to be around.
Yeah.
And so this is actually, we do this in service of our kids and for the good of our kids.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Did
the
you want
last
to comment
thing we did want to comment on the fact that this person compared children doing chores, children helping out in the home that they live in, to abuse and to slavery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if you're threatening them in any way, to do their chores, if you threaten them with
any kind of punishment, like if you don't do this, then you don't get to do this.
Yeah, that's abuse. You are not entitled to slaves. That's the comment. Now, one thing to point out, I think, is this word punishment. Punishment is an unpopular word today, right?
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, and
punishment is linked
to abuse.
Of course,
no, this is not even punishment. It's the threat. Even the threatening of a punishment is abuse.
Is abuse. So, of course, if the person were here, I would love to have them define what they mean by punishment, because people have different definitions of like consequences or discipline or punishment. So people have separated these all mean different things. So when they use the word punishment, they might connect it to abuse, because
real physical abuse.
Yeah, because in their mind, that's what punishment is.
Yeah, I think that's insightful.
So we would need for them to define, does a punishment mean what we were talking about? Like, hey, 13-year-old, if you don't get your chores done, I'm not going to drive you to your friend's house and let you spend the night because you haven't done your obligation. So why would I do my obligation? That sort of thing. But we would need to know what they mean.
Yeah. So there's the go to. We've talked about tactics on here, right?
Yeah.
Those two Columbo questions that Greg Kokel talks about. What do you mean by that? Such a key question.
Yeah.
But the comments, it's if you in any way threaten them with punishment, that's even abuse. So it's not actually if you carried it out. It's just if you threaten someone. That's abuse. And I think the thing to highlight on these kind of comments is to say they can be irresponsible comments, because what they end up doing is they minimize real abuse. If laying out a consequence for your kid, is the same thing as abuse, well, that then minimizes the seriousness of real abuse where children are being physically, harmed. And and then to say you're not entitled to slaves, to make an equivalency here between you getting a child to
take out the trash.
Yeah, do chores in the home.
Yeah.
And even if we were to say yes, and you do that with consequences, there are good consequences and bad consequences. And to do that, I'm going to use a word that that in our culture, again, not a good word, force your kid to do something. Well, actually, that's the job of parents, is to force your kids to do things they don't want to do.
To do what's right, even when they don't want to.
Exactly. But even think, and it's just good for us all of us to stop right now and to even think how that hit us. To say, I'm in one way, I'm supposed to force my kids to do things. Now, again, you have to ask, what do you mean by force?
Yeah.
We're not talking about abuse. We're talking about there's consequences for behavior. That's how we all learn to do good things. But then to say that is equivalent to slavery, that is irresponsible. That is a travesty, because that minimizes the horror and the evil of slavery. And so some of these, and that's why I think YouTube gets us to say outrageous things. And when you start examining them, you go, that is irrational.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Which makes me wonder with sympathy. And again, this is why we go after ideas on the Maven Parent Podcast. We don't go after people, but I think as people, we do need to think about if we have a hard time with discipline with our kids because maybe we were raised in a home where punishment was humiliation or physical abuse or whatever, and it was not done in a God-honoring way. Our parents didn't honor God by the way they raised us.
Yeah.
Then these things are going to be hard because we've had that kind of a past.
Yeah.
And so we have to work through that so that we can discipline our kids in the healthy way, in the God-intended way. God is clear, parents are to discipline their kids. So a good, loving God gives commands that are good and loving. And so he means discipline in its proper way. And so we want to just be aware as parents if some of our ideas on this stuff are affected by how we grew up.
Yeah. Now, we responded to that comment on YouTube and said some of these things. And I just want to give credit. The person responded back. So and we haven't even gotten to interact with those comments and you can see how they say in their comments, making a kid do something is forcing them, and forcing them to do housework is slave labor. So they kind of double down on this. I don't think the response was very compelling as well. I think the same things that we've said apply to even that response. But this is all good and important stuff for us to think through, because these are largely the messages of the world.
Yes.
And I think we even talk about the idea of how people view kids now. There's this, there's this whole critical theory mood. It's just in the water now, where the way you categorize people and people groups is kind of, you got an oppressor and you got an oppressed group. And now you're hearing that with parents as the oppressors and children as the oppressed group. Mm-hmm. When you hear that kind of category, that kind of language, and you see this kind of categorization, red flags need to go up right away, because there's a worldview there underneath critical theory. Well, hopefully that is helpful stuff in helping you as a parent or a grandparent or a school teacher or whatever to strengthen the sense of obligation and tie that into flourishing and help our kids to develop a work ethic and all that good stuff, but ultimately to see how all of this stuff does relate back to their relationship with their Creator. Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.